There's a white powder that can kill every trace of moss and algae on your roof in less than 3 weeks. It costs less than $5 at almost any hardware store. One single application can protect your entire roof for up to 2 years, without you ever climbing a ladder, hiring a contractor, or touching a pressure washer. You don't scrub it. You don't spray it. You don't even need to step on your roof. You simply apply it once, and the rain does the rest. Meanwhile, the roofing industry in the United States generates over $76 billion every single year. The most expensive repair the average homeowner will ever face is a full roof replacement, often costing anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000, depending on the size of the home. And the number one biological cause of premature roof failure isn't something dramatic like a storm or a fallen tree. It's something much quieter, something that spreads slowly, almost invisibly, until the damage is already done. Moss. It doesn't just sit on the surface of your roof. It grows into it. It lifts shingles from underneath, traps moisture against the wood, and slowly breaks down the structure that protects your entire home. By the time you notice it, the damage is already deep inside the layers you can't see. And that's usually the moment a contractor shows up and tells you the same thing every homeowner hears at least once. The whole roof needs to be replaced. So here's the question that almost nobody asks. If a $5 solution exists that can stop this process before it even starts, why have you never heard of it? Why isn't it recommended in basic home maintenance guides? Why doesn't every contractor mention it before quoting you a 5-figure repair? Why isn't it the first thing you see when you search for roof maintenance online? The answer is not that it doesn't work. The answer is that it works too well, because a solution that costs a few dollars and lasts for years doesn't fit into a system that depends on repeat repairs, expensive services, and predictable failure cycles. And when a simple fix threatens an entire stream of revenue, it doesn't get promoted. It gets ignored. It gets buried. And eventually, it disappears from the conversation entirely. This is the story of that solution. And more importantly, why you were never supposed to find it. Now let's talk about the part that most homeowners completely underestimate, because this is where the real damage begins. Moss is not just something that sits on top of your roof making it look old or neglected. It's not a surface stain. It's not dirt you can wash away. It's a living organism. And the way it grows is far more aggressive than most people realize. At first, it appears harmless. A thin green layer spreading slowly across shaded areas, usually on the north side where sunlight barely reaches. You might look at it and think it's just cosmetic, something you'll deal with later. But what you're actually seeing is only the surface of a much deeper problem already in progress. Moss doesn't have roots like traditional plants. Instead, it uses microscopic thread-like structures that act like anchors. These structures wedge themselves into the tiny pores and gaps of your shingles, places that were never designed to hold moisture or organic growth. As the moss spreads, those anchors push deeper and wider, forcing the layers of your roof slightly apart. Not enough to notice, not yet, but enough to change how your roof behaves when it rains. And that's when the real damage begins. Every time it rains, water no longer flows cleanly down your roof. Instead, it gets trapped, held in place by the moss like a sponge pressed against the surface. That moisture sits there for hours, sometimes days, soaking into the materials underneath. Over time, it seeps beneath the shingles, reaching the underlayment and eventually the wooden deck that supports your entire roof structure. Now imagine that happening over and over again, week after week, season after season. In colder climates, the situation gets even worse. That trapped water freezes and expands, then thaws and contracts, slowly cracking the shingles from the inside out. Edges begin to curl, granules start to loosen, the protective layer weakens, and none of it is visible from the ground. From the outside, it still just looks like moss, but underneath, your roof is starting to fail. And here's the part that makes this so expensive. By the time you notice signs like leaks, stains on your ceiling, or warped shingles, the damage has already moved beyond the surface. At that point, cleaning the moss doesn't fix the problem, because the structure underneath has already been compromised. That's when the contractor shows up. They don't talk about moss. They don't talk about prevention. They point to the damage and tell you the only solution left is replacement. And they're not wrong. At that stage, repair often isn't enough. But what they don't tell you is that the entire process started years earlier with something that could have been stopped in minutes. Moss is not a cosmetic issue. It's a slow, silent failure mechanism built into millions of roofs. And while it spreads quietly above your head, it's doing one thing extremely well: turning a small, preventable problem into a massive, unavoidable expense. So if moss is quietly destroying roofs from the inside out, the next question becomes unavoidable. What actually stops it? Not temporarily, not cosmetically, but at the level where the damage begins. The answer isn't new. It isn't experimental. And it isn't something hidden behind expensive equipment or proprietary formulas. It's something far simpler and far more unsettling once you understand it. Certain metals have the ability to kill living organisms on contact. Not just bacteria, but algae, mold, spores, and moss. This isn't theory. It's a documented scientific phenomenon known as the oligodynamic effect, the ability of metal ions to disrupt and destroy biological cells, even in extremely small concentrations. And two of the most effective metals ever identified for this purpose are zinc and copper. When these metals come into contact with water, even something as ordinary as rain, they release microscopic ions. You can't see them, you can't feel them. But once they're in motion, they begin interacting with anything organic in their path. Now imagine what happens on your roof. A small amount of zinc placed along the ridgeline sits there, completely inactive, waiting. Then the rain arrives. As water flows over the metal, it carries those ions downward across every shingle, every groove, every hidden gap where moss tries to grow. And when those ions reach the moss, the process begins immediately. They bind to the proteins inside the cells. They interfere with enzyme activity. They break down the internal structure that allows the organism to retain moisture and survive. Slowly at first, then all at once, the moss begins to die from the inside out, not scraped, not blasted away, destroyed at the cellular level. Within days, the deep green color fades to brown. Within weeks, the structure collapses, and over time, natural rainfall washes the remains away without you touching a single part of your roof. No pressure washing. No chemicals sprayed at high force, no damage to the materials underneath, just a silent process repeating itself every time it rains. And here's what makes this even harder to ignore. This isn't a modern trick or a recent discovery. Builders observed it centuries ago. Structures topped with copper remained untouched by moss for generations while surrounding buildings deteriorated. Decades of research have confirmed the same mechanism across different environments, climates, and materials. So now you're left with a question that becomes harder and harder to dismiss. If something this simple, this inexpensive, and this effective has been known for so long, why is it almost never part of the conversation? Why are homeowners taught to clean, to repair, to replace, but not to prevent. And more importantly, before today, had you ever heard of this? Be honest. Drop a comment below and tell me, was this the first time you've come across this idea? Or have you seen it before and never realized how powerful it actually is? And this is where the story takes a turn that most people don't expect, because at this point, it's no longer just about moss or roofs or even science. It's about incentives. Because once you understand that a $5 solution can interrupt a problem that fuels billions in repair costs, you start to see the system differently. Not as a collection of bad actors, but as a structure that rewards one outcome above all others: failure. The roofing industry doesn't make its money when your roof lasts forever. It makes its money when your roof needs attention, when it needs cleaning, when it needs treatment, and eventually when it needs to be replaced. According to industry data, the majority of roofing revenue doesn't come from new construction. It comes from maintenance, repair, and replacement of existing roofs that have already begun to fail. Now think about what that means. A simple method that prevents moss from ever taking hold doesn't just solve a problem. It removes the need for multiple services built around that problem. No recurring cleanings, no annual treatments, fewer emergency repairs, fewer full replacements triggered by biological damage. And when a solution quietly eliminates entire categories of revenue, it doesn't need to be banned to disappear. It just needs to be ignored. You won't find it highlighted in most homeowner guides. It's rarely mentioned during contractor consultations. It's not positioned as a standard preventive step in the same way other maintenance practices are. Not because it doesn't work, but because it doesn't fit into a model that depends on problems continuing to exist. And here's the part that should stay with you. Nothing we've talked about is new. The science has been known for generations. The materials are widely available. The process is simple enough for almost anyone to apply. The only missing piece was awareness. Until now. Because once you know this, you can't unknow it. You start to recognize the difference between reacting to damage and preventing it entirely. You begin to question how many other expensive problems exist simply because the simple solutions were never put in front of you. That's exactly what this channel is about. If this opened your eyes even a little, take a second to support the channel. Subscribe and share this with someone who owns a home. You're not just passing along a tip. You're passing along knowledge that can save thousands of dollars and years of avoidable damage. And this is just the beginning. In the next video, we're going to break down one of the most common solutions homeowners use, and why it might be doing more damage than the problem itself. It's something millions of people rely on every year, believing they're protecting their home, when in reality, they're accelerating the exact failure they're trying to avoid. So, stay with me, because what comes next is the part they really don't want you to hear.